Hello coders, welcome back to another video. If you watched the previous video, then you know that we just covered encapsulation and working with private variables and the getter and setter method. Now I'm going to continue working with the same classes as before. We had the house class, the building class, and the construction class. In the previous video, we only worked with the house and the construction class. And remember, our construction class was the only thing that was actually running in our example. We were not actually running the house class. We were just using objects from it. So now in this tutorial, we are going to be using the house and the building class all in one class, which is going to be the construction. So we're going to be combining them. So the first thing I want to get into is what is this topic of the video going to be? In this topic, we are going to be working with inheritance. So inheritance is basically exactly kind of what it sounds like. You know, a person can inherit this from their parent or their grandparent. So they are in relation to one another. So in the case of inheritance, this is what we like to call subclasses in our superclass. So to make an analogy, the superclass example would be our parents, right? We came from our parents. We are a product of our parents. Our parents are superior to us. They came first. Without them, there is no us. So that our parent would be our superclass. Now, we have our subclass. The subclass would be you. You are the child of your parent. So your parent is the superclass and you are the subclass of that superclass. You are the product of that superclass. So you have the superclass, which is the parent, and the subclass, which is the child. So in the case of inheritance, the subclass can inherit things from the parent class, just like you can inherit certain features. So, for example, you might look more like your mom than your dad. So, in that case, you got more inheritance from your dad than you did your mom. So, the same thing is going to work in Java inheritance. Basically, the superclass is the class that's being inherited from, while the subclass is going to be the class that is inheriting from another class, which typically is the parent class, but a subclass can also inherit from other classes other than the superclass as well. So with inheritance, for you to inherit from a class, you have to use the keyword extends. So what does that look like? So we're going to go ahead and just go to our house and just review. So as you know, here we had our private variables, we had our public variables, and we had these two methods here, or the class methods, not considering our getters and setter methods that we have here. But we technically have four methods here, and we have our variables here as well. So we're going to go ahead and just keep that in mind for the example. So we have house class. Now we're going to the building class. So buildings, as you know, have rooms, right? Buildings have rooms. And in the sense of the fact that buildings have rooms, they also have bathrooms, right? So there's going to be the case in our program where we're going to want to know how many rooms or building bathrooms are in this building. So if you look here, we have this method, right? We have this method here, and it's asking how many rooms do you have, how many bathrooms do you have. So in this case, I'm just going to take this out. And I'm going to change this for now, and you'll see why. All right, so we're going to go back to our building. So technically, there is the case where you can use other methods from other classes. that is through inheritance. And for us to use inheritance, we have to use the extends keyword. So extends would go after the class name, which is building. So it would actually go extends, and then we're going to tell it what class it's extending from. So because we want to use the method that exists in the house class, we're going to extend from the house class. So that is allowing us to extend allows us to access variables and methods from house class. All right. So now we have that. So, for example, if we were to use this, then basically building will let us know that there's rooms and bathrooms in there. But in the case of these two classes, they do not have to be the exact same. They can be totally different. So obviously a building is not going to be set up like a house. It's going to be completely different. So we're going to go ahead and set up our building to be different. So one thing that a building has that a house doesn't is typically a lot of floors. Now, not saying that you can't have a lot of floors, but it has a lot more floors. And in the case of the house, yes, they do have multiple floors. So we could actually, in the house, we could put over here, we'll put int floors. Okay, we'll put floors here, and then here we could also do floors. So I'm not going to do it here, but we could technically put it here, but I just want to get back to showing you the inheritance part. So we can also have floors, which we're going to use over there. And I'm just going to first basically just put a variable called, or not a variable, a method called method. We're going to call it building, and let me not capitalize, building info, and we're going to get the info back for the building. So here we can say, all right, that we're going to set the variables. So remember this, we had the this keyword, and if you see, as soon as we type this, you see these variables show up. So age, bathrooms, floors, rooms, and the scan for the scanner, which is from the house class. So we can use that scanner from the house class in this case. So I'm not going to do that, but you could, and I might show you just in case you're curious. But first I'm just going to set my values. So this dot, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do rooms, and obviously we're not putting any information to it right now. I'll just create them, and then we'll go back and put the information to it. And then this dots floors as well. And I'm going to basically make it a method that accepts parameters. So string, we'll put, or not string, it's going to be int. We're going to put room. Then we'll do int bathrooms. And then we'll do int floors. And then we have that, and we're going to put this here. It's going to equal rooms. It's going to equal bathrooms. It's going to equal floors. All right, so that's allowing us to pass in the information when we call the method from the construction class. So we'll go over here, and you see we don't have any information here. So we'll go ahead and create our building. Create our building object, and that's going to be building B1 is going to equal new building. that's going to create our object that we're going to use. Go here. All right, and then remember in the case of building that, let's check this out. You see here, you get age, bathrooms, floors, rooms, etc. So you can access them directly from here, but we're going to use building info. Now, as you see here, when we call our method, it just automatically put default values for our ints. So it would say that basically our building has 0 rooms, 0 bathrooms, and 0 floors. Now, if we return to our building method, if we were to run our code, nothing would happen because there is nowhere that we're actually telling it to print out this information. We're not telling it to print it out in here somewhere, and we're not telling it to print it out here somewhere. So we would actually do that in here. So system.out.print line, and we're going to tell it to print the information to us. So the building has, then we'll say, we'll put rooms plus, and I just like to do this so I can see what I'm actually asking for. Of course, there's other ways that you could format this print statement, but I'm just doing this for the case of the tutorial so you can see the separate components that are going into it. Then we'll add it, or actually we'll just do a comma. Then do bathroom, oops, not bathrooms. Then we'll do floors. It's gonna go off the screen. So this is just a print statement that's just going to print out the information to us. So it's just saying this building has this amount of rooms, bathrooms, and floors. So we're going to go over here, and we're just going to set some values. So we'll do rooms. So we'll say it has 45 rooms. It has 10 floors, or actually this is supposed to be bathrooms. 20 bathrooms and 10 floors. So we'll go ahead and run that. And then it's going to pretty much return to us exactly how many rooms, bathrooms, and floors it has. It didn't tell us rooms because I forgot to type that in here. All right, so then basically from this, run it again, you see that the building has 45 rooms, 20 bathrooms, and 10 floors. Now, if we go back here, you see in this class, we did not create the variables. There was no variables created. The variables did not have to be created because it's taking the variables when we created them from our house class. Because we used inheritance, it's using the variables that existed in our house class in our building class. So we did not have to create the variables all over again, which is exactly why inheritance is very useful. We do not have to keep creating the same variables and the same methods for multiple classes that have them. We can just use them from one. So in this case, we are using our variables from our house class in our building class, which is why we did not set them like we did in the last class. We're just simply calling them here. So that is the very good part about working with your inheritance class. You can inherit anything from that class. So remember, being that you can inherit anything from a class, here we have we had the private house info. We also had the house info. So, and here it's just saying, there are rooms and bathrooms. So could you use this with the building object? Let's see, B1 dot. And then if you see, let's go over here. What was it called again? House info. b1.house, b1.house info, and there it is. So technically, yes, you can use any methods that are going to be within that house method. So for the building, it says how many rooms we have, 45. How many bathrooms? We'll say 20. And then there it says there are 45 rooms and 20 bathrooms. And we're using this with our building object. But remember, we technically don't have that actual method in here. That method that we're asking how many rooms and how many bathrooms do you have only exists in the house class. But because our building class is an extension of our house class, we can use it. So to go back to the example of the parent and the child, right? Your parent has a house and you use it. It's not your house, it's your parents' house, but they allow you to use it. The same thing works for Java. In this case, our house class is allowing our child class or our building class to use whatever they have. That's what your parents do. You can use their car, you can eat their food, you can live in their house. You know, basically what we hated as children growing up is our parents love to use that. This is my house, you know, this is my food. Same thing works here. So the building class can use and access anything within the house class because it inherited it from the house class. But in the case of the parent and the child, right? You're not exactly like your parent. You may have gotten things from them, but you're not exactly like your parent. So in the case of inheritance, technically you can create your own methods and your own variables that are not located inside of the house class. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we might have a building, right? We could say, what are other characteristics of a building? Parking garage, for example. So we could say int, or we'll just put parking lots. Like how many parking lots does the building have? So we could say here, public void. I'm just going to do void because I don't want to necessarily return anything. Public void get, or public void parking info. Trying to figure out how to structure this. And then we'll do system.out.print. Print line. I need to copy this again. All right. And then I'm going to say how many lots does, or let's say parking lots does the building have? Then we'll go ahead and set our value of parking lots is going to equal. Now remember, we did have that variable where we could have the scan, right? So let's see if we can do it this way, right? Next line is what we're using. Oh, next line. So remember, we created a scanner in our parent class. Oops, can't type. Oh, all right. We created a scanner in our parent class of house, which was right here, right? And in this case here, if you were trying to do something like this, you see that it's not going to work in this sense because next line is going to actually access the string. So all I have to do in this case would be next int. And then there you go. So I did not create another scanner in this class. I didn't have to because I inherited everything that existed in the house class, which included the scanner. So I don't have to create another scanner, which is another big plus. So in this case, when I ask that, it's going to automatically set, our parking info. And then in this case, we could say a print statement here. So we could say the building has parking lots. Then we'll say here parking lots. All right, so now we have a new method. This method only exists inside of our inside of our building class. So this parking info does not exist in our house class. So this is what allows the subclass to be different from the parent class. You don't have to be the exact same. Yes, you can copy whatever is in the inherited class, but you can still create whatever additional methods you would like in the class that is extending from the parent class. So we could create 50 more methods if we wanted to, and 50 more variables in here. But what I want you to realize is whatever we create in here is not accessible in the house class. You cannot access parking info from the house class. So if you create a house object and try to run parking info, it's not going to work because the house class does not inherit from the building class. So moral of the story with that is that whatever you create in building cannot be accessed by house, but whatever we create in house can be accessed from building. So only the class that is inheriting can access the variables. Because house is not inheriting from building, it cannot run the variables and methods that are specific to the building class. So it's a one-way street. It doesn't go both ways. You can't access the variables from building in-house. You can only access the variables in-house from building because that is what's being inherited. So just keep that in mind. It is a one-way street. You cannot go back and forth between the two. Inheritance only works per class situation and not back to back. So here you see that we created another method. We have these two methods. They are not in our house class, but we could use the methods in our house class here. And you see we used it here as house info. So we could have used that. You could also try to use the private and the owner as well. For that, you would have to create the getters and setters for the owner, which we did not do in the other example. So if I were to scroll down and create the getter for that, so public string get owner, then we'll do return owner. All right, and then let me do the setter, public void set owner equals string owner, and then I will do this dot owner is going to equal owner. All right, so now we have those getters and setters. Come over here, and then we could create another method. So public void important info. Now, what I'm going to show you here is how to use the other methods and variables that we have. So if you remember, we want to try to get that important information that we want to use. So we could easily say let's go ahead and create our important information. So this dot, and if you look, we have the get address, get owner, but we actually want to set the address and set the owner. So I'm gonna just show you that you can do that, set owner. Now for us to do that, we actually have to accept the values of it. And we would have to pass it in to the program. So here we'll go ahead and do our print statement. We could say, what is the address? Then here we could say address, which is not going to work that way, but this dot set, or actually, hold on, let's do string a equals, and this is going to collect our address. We're going to do scan, or this dot scan dot next line. So this is going to accept our address or hold our address, and then this dot set address, pass in the A. So it's going to set our address with whatever we passed into A here. Same thing here. So this is going to be set address with user input. And here we're going to do the same thing. We're going to tell them to enter what or who is the owner of the building. We're going to go ahead and set our scanner. So string O is equal to this dot scan dot next line. And then we're going to go ahead and pass that into our setter, O. And then we want to, let's split it up. So we'll say set important info here. And then we'll create a method that's just going to print it. Public void print important info. All right, go ahead and scroll on down, and then we'll go ahead and just print it out. So let me paste it. We're gonna say the building address is, we're going to use our getters. So we're going to say this dot get address we're going to say the owner is, I'm going to say this dot get owner. All right, so we created these two new methods. We'll go over to our construction.java to run them. So let's see, we have to use set important info and print important info. So we'll go over here, we'll do b1 dot set important info. Then we'll do b1 dot print important info, and we'll go ahead and run that. So let's run it, and our first part runs. Now this is asking us for our house info information. So I'll just go ahead and put 45 and 20. And then you see here, it's saying what is the address and who is the owner of the class. So because it's private, it's going to work exactly like the other example. So it's a little weird. As you see here, I put RS, but it didn't allow us to put the address. So in this case, would it have been better for us to just kind of create those variables inside of building by themselves? Yes, which you could do. So technically you could have created int or string owner here. Then you could have created string address here, right? And then basically you could try to get the information. So we don't necessarily have the get address in this. So if you hover, it says it's going to get the house.get address. In this case, if we have our own address in here, like we just created at the top, and if I switch this to owner, go back over here, or let's take a look. All right, go back over here. Let's run that. Just put in some numbers. So now it's telling us that it's null. Okay, so it's telling us that it's empty. And that is because it's using the set address from the house. Because here we're not using set address. We took it away. So in this case, we're not actually, this isn't happening because we're not setting the owner and we're not setting the address. Here we tried to set the address and the owner that existed in here, but that's not the case. We didn't do that here. Here we are actually trying to set the address and the owner from the house class, but we tried to print the address and the owner of the building class, but we never actually passed the values to them. So that is another thing that you have to consider when you're working with these inheritance. You have to pay attention to the objects that you're actually working with. So when you hover over, or in this case, in my IDE, not all IDs do it, but when you hover over, it'll give you some information about that specific variable. So you see here, it's telling us that building.address is what is being printed. But here, we didn't necessarily set it anywhere. We didn't set it. We could have set it here, but I don't want to do that. That'll be complicating. So I'll just do it here. So address equals 123 Happy Street. And then owner equals, I don't know, McDonald's. All right. And then go over here, you run it again. How many rooms? We're just going to do 40. Oops, wasn't supposed to do that. Let me retry that. 43, 12. All right, and then it asks us, what is the address? Who is the owner? Ta-da. All right, so you see I put in 12. Now, simply because I put in 12, it kind of did nothing with the information because that was actually going off of the set important info. And here is printing out our information from our print important info. Now, the reason this one works is because we actually set our values of our class variables, address and owner. Remember, they exist in our building class. They also exist in our house class, but we're not calling those variables. We're calling those variables here, okay? We're calling those variables here, which is why there are some issues with that. So we could do here, I'm going to split this up so you see how we could also do this. So here we could say set building address. So I'm just going to keep the information in there. I'm going to create another method. We're going to do that same thing for set building owner. All right. Then we are going to take this here and slide it down. All right, it's going to ask us for this information. It's going to set it, and then we could also, get it. But I'm just going to leave that here. So we now have two new methods: set building address and set building owner. So go back to construction. All right, stay with me. The reason this is an error because we basically changed that method, so it doesn't exist anymore. And then I'm just going to put a print statement, and then we're going to say reassigning building variables, and then we're going to call b1.set building address and b1.set building owner. So now we run this, it's going to, give us our other questions. All right, here you say, what is the address? Who is the building owner? So you see it's letting us put those in, or just the one. So technically you could also do it like that. It's setting it. The only reason you don't see anything happening is because it's not getting the information. And here also going back to back with the scanner is sometimes confusing. So it's just basically only allowing the scanner to run for the second time the scanner's called, which is the owner one and not the address one. So this is how things can get sticky when you're working with your code. So you're going to run into situations like this. And sometimes it's just easier to create things inside of the actual class, like we did in print important info. So we created the address and the owner in this class, and we also set them in this class instead of using them from the inherited. So no, you do not always have to use what's in the inherited class. You don't have to always use everything from the parent class in the subclass, and you don't actually have to use anything from the parent class in the subclass. It's just a choice based on you. If you feel like, hey, I want to use this one method from this class, then you can do that. If you want to use 5, you can do that. If you want to use the same variables, you can do that as well. But in this case, it's not required that you actually use those. So that is how you work with inheritance. I know this topic can be a little complicated. I just wanted to show you different things that you could do with inheritance. So you see here, our subclass has all of these methods that do not exist in our house class, but we can use any of these methods and variables that exist in the house class within our building class. But our house class cannot use any of these methods. So if we were to create a house object, our house object could not use building info or parking info, set building address. It would not allow that to happen. But in the case of our building can use our private house info. It can use our get address, set address, because it is inheriting from the house. So it is a little complicated to understand, especially if you're first getting started with inheritance. But inheritance just allows you to save time, reuse code in certain cases, and pretty much just allows you to interact with your classes and objects in Java a little more. This concept is generally not easy to understand the first time around. This is something that you really understand more with practice. Similar to what I was doing here, you saw I was just kind of thinking off of my head, what else could I do to test? The best way for you to learn is to test it out. You know, if you have a question about it, like, hey, can I do this? Try it out. The only way you'll know if it's going to work is if you try it out. And you'll never know if it works or not if you don't try it out. So if you're curious, like, hey, can I do this? I encourage you to just try it out. You'll easily get your answer. Either you're going to get an error or it will work. That's the best way to learn in programming, especially for me. So, what I would like for you all to do, if you notice when I ran this, it did not allow me to do the what is the address. So, I usually don't do this in the videos, but I don't want you to just watch and not be able to take a challenge away, especially after all these videos. So, here's a challenge. I want you to see if you are able to figure out why we could not enter the address in. Okay, so remember here, it only allowed us to put in one input. Here, it did not allow us to do both inputs. And in this case, we did technically say we want to run a scanner and accept the input, right? So I wonder why it's not working, you know? Now I know why it's not working, but I want you to figure out why it's not working. So that'll give you a little challenge to end this off, especially if you coded this out yourself. You should be able to try to figure it out. So this is the best way for you to learn and problem solve. This is getting into problem solving. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here on inheritance. Hopefully that was helpful for you to understand how to work with inheritance and how that works. So I'll go ahead and end it here. So as always, I want you all to continue to practice and code. The more you code, the better you'll get. The better you get, the more confidence you'll feel. And I know that you are going to be the best coder you can be as long as you continue to practice. So this is not a I can come and practice for 10 minutes a day sort of job. You definitely have to invest your time into understanding these topics and understanding how they work. So I do encourage you to at least spend a few hours on programming a week to ensure that you're getting stronger in your skills. So I hope that you learned something helpful. Please watch this video multiple times, as you're not going to be able to understand just by watching this one time. There might be something that you hear the second time that you didn't hear the first time. So please just consider that. Take your time to digest what's in this video and understand it. And until next time, just keep coding, and I will see you on the next video.